What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So with spring practice now underway, I really wanted to start looking into what are the biggest questions surrounding different programs across the country right now and how I think they will ultimately be answered in the end, with this video focusing in on the defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs. So let's go ahead and get into it with question number 1. And for me, the first and largest question to see here is, how do you replace a generational defense that they had last year? This question to me is just the biggest because it is by far the hardest to answer for a program at this point. I mean, Georgia loses an insane amount of talent off of one of the best defenses in recent college football history, and replacing that isn't really possible to just fully reload, replace it, no problem. I mean, Georgia is, one of the best programs that could have to replace something like that, and they're going to have to find a way to if they want to make another title run this year. But losing guys like Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, Devontae Wyatt, Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall, Quay Walker, Adam Anderson, Darian Kendrick, Lewis Cine, that's just what comes off the top of my head right there. Losing that amount of talent just on your defense, that means that only a handful of guys are going to return on the Georgia defense that have really meaningful playing time. And now they have more than enough raw talent to make it work in the long run, and their coaching staff for this defense is always one of the best around, and it will be once again next year. There's just an incredible amount of experience on that defensive staff. They're going to be very well coached. I have no doubt about that. But being well coached and being really talented is different than being experienced and a proven starter, and that is a huge void that they're going to have to fill in some ways. There are some massive shoes to fill there, and if they can find a way to do it, it's going to largely determine how good Georgia can be heading into next season. There is the chance that they kind of take a little bit of a dip just because of the absurd amount of talent coming off of the defense. Now, the hole at linebacker to me is especially concerning due to a vast number of injuries that have been suffered at this position in the spring, which is going to really hurt the development there, as well as losing the top 3 guys at the off-ball linebacker spot from last season. That is a huge void to fill. Now, the secondary does return Keely Ringo and Chris Smith from last season, which should help out a lot. And last year's transfer portal addition of Tyke Smith should be a major player this year, now that he should hopefully be healthy for a full season heading in, and he should likely be a starter as well. Whereas last year he didn't get too much playing time. But there are still concerns among the secondary, particularly in its depth. Now, adding an absurdly good incoming freshman class to the secondary is very helpful there. Lots of bodies that are very talented, but again, lack of experience there, which sort of contributes to your lack of depth in that position. The defensive line loses a ridiculous amount of talent as well, but it does return Jalen Carter, who might end up being the best player on last year's defense when it's all said and done, and he will have a chance to prove it this year because he's going to be the guy that has to step up front. Overall, the pieces are still there as far as just raw talent goes, and I wouldn't count out a late portal addition or two to bolster that defense even more potentially, but the main issues are just a huge lack of experience in leadership and then also a lack of proven ability on the defense despite the true talent that it has. It's going to be incredibly interesting to see how all of that comes together in the end come this fall, though. Now, question number 2 for me is, who steps up at wide receiver? The next real looming question for Georgia has to be that wide receiver position. Losing George Pickens to the draft and Jermaine Burton to Alabama hurts a lot here. Couple that with guys like Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint and Dominic Blaylock fighting injuries still, and the position begins to look a little bit bleak. Kearis Jackson also suffered an injury heading into last season and is still not 100% healthy coming off of that, although I expect him to be full go by mid to end of spring here. And then you also look at high-quality tight end targets like Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, who are also going to miss the full duration of spring. And then Arian Smith and CJ Smith, who are both absolute burners, are also both out for spring with injuries, though they're not super major. They shouldn't be long-term issues. That's huge amounts of reps and practice time that they're losing there. And getting healthy would be a huge help, but there's still a pretty large hole for the pass catchers right now. Yes, getting healthy by the time the season comes around is one thing, but you still would love to be healthy for the spring when you have all of this turnover here. It would be great if you could get those guys into spring, get reps for them, get them some good practice. They need that. I mean, a lot of these guys need these spring reps to actually be able to reach that full potential in the long run when they are healthy in the fall. Georgia's going to have to lean on rising star A.D. Mitchell to lead the way at the wide receiver spot. And in a lot of ways, the surprise player of last season, Ladd McConkey, is going to have to see a large role once again, most likely. And then once guys like Marcus Rosemey and then Dominic Blaylock and Kearis Jackson and all get healthy, the wide receiver room should be much better. But for the spring period, things are looking fairly rough right now. And we know that Brock Bowers is going to be one of, if not the leading receiver for Georgia again next year. But if Georgia wants that offense to just take that next step heading into next season, which it might need to because the defense probably isn't going to be as good as it was last year, even if it's an elite defense again, probably not going to be as elite as last year's, then it's going to need the offense to step up and do a little bit better. And to do that, it's going to need guys like Arian Smith, Kearis Jackson, Dom Blaylock, Marcus Rosemey, even a guy like Eric Gilbert, who's now back with the team, currently working at tight end. He's worked at receiver some. See if you can get him involved, or anyone else that they can have step up as well, in addition to a guy like A.D. Mitchell. And similar to what I said about the defense, the talent is there for sure, but a lot of it is unproven, and none of these guys have really stepped up and taken over the position in a way that a healthy George Pickens did. And definitely don't count out the transfer portal as well for this wide receiver position, as this could be a very real option for Georgia heading forward, and could honestly be one of the most likely positions that Georgia would target in the portal, because they're going to need the help there. Regardless of who ends up filling the shoes and how it all shakes out, Georgia's going to need to find a go-to guy for next season on the perimeter in order to really improve their passing game going forward. Question number 3 I have is just, can they stay healthy? And that's questions largely based off of the previous 2 questions I asked. But with all of the extreme talent losses to the draft that Georgia has suffered, having the young guys healthy for spring is a huge benefit, and it's one that Georgia just doesn't have right now. The wide receiver room has been completely decimated with injuries, as has the tight end room. They currently only have 3 scholarship inside linebackers who are active right now for the spring due to injuries. Depth in the secondary is somewhat of a concern as well, as a large portion of the players there are freshmen with little to no experience in the actual game, and staying healthy is crucial to any team at any year, at any point, but especially so for Georgia this season, because they just don't have the wealth of experience, depth, and talent behind the first guys like they would do, like they would normally have, like they did last year. All they have is the talent behind it. Yes, the talent is loaded there, but no experience on it makes you, you're kind of rolling the dice on having to play those guys in meaningful play time. Last year, even the 2s and 3s for Georgia were frequently both talented and experienced players, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. But a lot of that is gone this upcoming year, and if 1 or 2 key pieces were to go down, Georgia may not have the answers behind them to really fill in that void, and that could be a serious problem going forward. Luckily, though, quarterback and running back are positions of depth, as is the offensive line, and when healthy, the tight end room should be a very deep position as well, but it has thus far not been healthy, so that doesn't really count at this point. And the rest of the team just doesn't have too much proven quality depth behind it, and that can be a real concern, especially as the Dogs limp through spring training incredibly beaten up and injured to this point. And that's not to say that they're not going to be able to figure it out, because if anybody can, it's going to be Kirby Smart, but it is most certainly a concern going forward for this team. Now I'm at question 4, and that is just, who is Stetson Bennett this year? This question could end up being the biggest of the year, or it could be a complete non-factor that never comes up at all. Only time will tell. But if Bennett is the clear starter and obvious number 1 option for Georgia next year, and he goes out and plays like it, then there won't be any controversy or issues here. However, despite the outstanding achievement that was and still is winning a national title last season, that was last season. It's a new year, and he's not going to be able to keep the job on last year's successes alone. Let's not forget also, last year wasn't just this outstanding year for Stetson Bennett. There were a lot of big moments where Stetson was less than the obvious best quarterback on the roster, to say the least, and there have already been some early rumblings in this spring that are suggesting a similar story once again. Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff have both gotten a lot of reps with the number ones on offense, which is to be expected. That doesn't mean all that much just yet. But if you add in that Kirby has also publicly challenged Stetson this spring as well, and not just specifically for on-the-field things, but for some off-the-field leadership questions as well, and Kirby has a tendency to do that with some of the guys that he has the most faith in, but it's still a challenge that's out there that adds a little bit more doubt, especially if you couple it with the fact that Stetson was leery of if he would even come back to Georgia at all in the first place, as he said he wasn't confident that the coaching staff would make what he considered to be the right decision. And so you add all of that together and a small controversy is already brewing. I personally hated the quarterback controversy from last season as it was talked about ad absolute nauseum, but we could end up with another one this year. If Stetson isn't the guy that everybody hopes he'll be, then guys like Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff could become major players on the success level of this team this season, and how Stetson answers the bell will make a massive impact on what this team looks like this fall, regardless of which way he goes with it. And that brings me to my fifth and final question, and that is, how will Georgia deal with the consequences of success? My final question is one that Kirby himself has alluded to on a number of occasions, but it's especially relevant now that Georgia has finally gotten over that mountaintop and won the national championship and beat Alabama to do it. Now that they have tasted that natty, will the whole team be hungry for another one, or maybe even hungrier than they were for the first one? Or will a little bit of complacency start to settle in, I know it won't with the staff, that's for sure, because Kirby has been around years and years and years of success at Alabama. He's done the same thing at Georgia so far, not to the same extent, obviously, but still, he knows how to handle that level of success, how to block out the noise, and I think the entire staff will follow his lead there. But the staff handling that kind of success and the players handling that kind of success are two totally different things. I have already heard some players that are speaking out about how the title banners are just a distraction and sort of a nuisance almost at this point for this year. And that's great to hear because it shows that a lot of these players are focused on blocking it out and they know that the national title last year guarantees them nothing this year. But the truth is, blocking out all of those distractions that come with success is a lot harder than most people want to think. What Alabama has done isn't normal, okay? Look at Clemson and ask them how hard things can be for you after winning a national title recently. Or LSU for that matter. They win a national title in 2019. Now look at them. They've got a brand new head coach because they had to get rid of the last one because of all the success that came and a lot of the discipline that they used to get that success faded away once they got there. Most teams don't maintain that same level of edge and intensity heading into the following season after winning a national championship, and all of that outside noise and drama that success brings with it can be a real pain for anyone to fight with. I personally think Georgia's going to be okay in this regard because Kirby has been around this kind of thing so many times in the past now, but it will definitely be worth monitoring going forward. Anyway, that'll do it for this video. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think about this video, my questions that I have for the Georgia program, and what your questions for the Georgia program to answer this spring are. Also, if you made it this far in the video, go ahead and leave a like because it helps out the channel tremendously, and subscribe for more college football content in the future as I will continue to be uploading very, very regularly going forward. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.